Well, welcome everyone to our Tableau series that we've been doing every couple weeks. We have a series of webinars where we go over the Tableau solution, different aspects of the Tableau platform, everything from connecting to data to visualization, and then to some of the topics like best practices that we find in working with our customers and how to best use the product. And today, the one we're going to be covering is dashboard best practices, and I guess I'd call a subtopic of visual best practice design. My name is Craig Bartell. I'm a solutions engineer with Tableau. I'm based in Tampa, Florida. I've been working with Kim and the team at NCDIT there for about 6 years now. We rolled it out originally, and I've worked with, I don't know, 20 plus of the agencies there that have rolled out Tableau. So know your environment pretty darn well. But I've been in the BI space for about 20 years or so, 20 plus years. And I have pretty much been in the business intelligence side of it or the analytics side of it. I've worked for about 4 or 5 different BI vendors over that course of term. And I've also worked in state and local government. So I have a very good eye to what you guys are all wanting to find out information on in your various environments. So I'm happy to engage with a lot of you, post this webinar if you want to just kind of talk about use cases, what are other customers doing, both at DIT and outside of DIT, around the country and your domain. So anyway, with that, we're going to get right in. The presentation is going to be skewed about the first half. We'll kind of talk through visual best practices, and then the second half, I will actually demonstrate through kind of building of a dashboard. We're going to actually be starting with a workbook that I have already created, some visualizations, some vizzes as we'd call them, and then we're going to assemble them pretty much kind of according to best practices, or as I would want to enforce the best practices. If you have any questions along the way, go ahead and put them in the chat window. I will glance over occasionally and see if I can answer it in stream. If not, we'll try to leave a few minutes at the end for questions. So with that, this is kind of the agenda as we talked about, why data visualization. Obviously, we know it's important. And a little bit about the science behind data visualization, because there are many things that our brain can process easier and not as easy, right? So we want to talk about those, talk about the actual layout, design best practices. I'll give you some examples of what I consider to be before and after. This was not so good, this is good. And then as usual, we use what is called the Superstore data set. It is a retail-oriented data set. I know it's not government or public sector related. The reason I use it is because all of our training materials pretty much follow it. So if you start using Tableau, you'll understand when we say something like tables aren't selling well in the East region, you'll know what I'm talking about. In fact, when we go through many of the training and workshops, we use that data set as well. So anyway, with that, I'm going to continue in. So, this is kind of one of those basic things about recognizing or analyzing data, right? If I were to ask you and put up this chart of numbers here, how many 9s are there in this grid? You would literally have to go left to right, top to bottom, and you'd have to accumulate them in your head. You'd have to say, oh, I see 1 in line 2, spot 1. I see 1 in spot 4, right? It's very difficult to discern that. So this is obviously not a great way to visualize data. However, by simply applying color, we now can see that there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 9s that are present in the data. But I still had to go cycle through that whole set of data, row, column by column, and segment out which ones of those were 9s in there. Likewise, when you're looking at crosstabs of data, now I understand that many people require and demand, crosstabs of data, but once again, I guess if I were to ask you which is the least performing product line of subcategories in all of this data, you would again have to go left to right, top to bottom, before you would arrive and determine that the corporate category for the tables subcategory at negative 35,000 is probably the worst, but it really doesn't stand out. Actually, this one, as I see here, this is probably a different version of this chart. But again, it's not easily to discern. However, if again we apply color, we can now see not only the negative numbers, but it draws our attention to the numbers that are bolder, right? And we can do color, different grades of color and things like that. And then I would uh, venture a guess that this is probably an even more effective way of showing it, right? We can immediately go to home office and tables and we see 43 negative 292, right? So again, this is just one of those things where I'm presented many times with a spreadsheet of data and people are like, this is the way we drive our business. And I'd say, well, hey, did you ever consider using this way of driving your business? Oh, not really. My boss always wants to see it in a spreadsheet, you know? So again, I tongue in cheek here, but you as a data analyst, you have the power, I guess, to suggest alternative ways of visualizing data. And I highly encourage you to use your design skills around that. So there's many different types of what we call pre-attentive attributes of visual perception. So we can, and what I mean is we can use these inner visualizations. We can use the length of a line, the width, the orientation, size, shape, curvature. You know, I'm reading all these obviously, but you can use color, as we've talked about, positioning, motion. That's another thing. We've added animation to our visualization. So there's all these different methods we can use to extend beyond just the good old textual window, right? So how do we build them, right? So there's certain tenets that we want to follow, right? We want to do a lot of things like follow clear messaging. Like, for example, I'll show you in some of the visualizations, instead of just putting the name map on the chart that has a map, why don't I say something like where our constituents are geographically most located, you know, something that guides the end user to what they're looking at, right? Or put a subtitle below the title of the visualization that says, for information about where we have the most constituents that have diseases of this type, click on this and it will show you this, right? Be very deliberate. Use color, use informed design, and then deliver. This is the other thing too, deliver relevant information. Just don't put it out there because you think it's something that's cool, right? Look at your business, look at your consumers, and deliver relevant information, right, at the right level of aggregation that's good for them. So again, a lot of things to think about other than just opening up a worksheet and starting to drag and drop and put data in it. Again, thoughtful planning, knowing your audience, who's the intended audience. You know, do you want them to literally just open it up, find one value, and be on their way, right? Because if you have 4 or 6 visualizations on your dashboard, you're not accomplishing that fact. And I'll kind of go back to that example later on when I construct a dashboard, is talking about, you know, where do you want to have them focus on the screen? Do you want to have them focus at the top of the screen? Now, I would say this isn't a really good example, but again, know your audience and start simple. So the other thing we need to think about is when we actually deploy this to, say, a mobile device, they're not going to be able to see very intricate textual tables and font sizes that are very small. So we want to use maybe tiles to show our data and give a couple filters on the screen and big blocked selection items that allow us to show that. Oh, and the other thing, by the way, on phone, if you think about it, when you scroll through an app, if you're looking at your email on an app, you're going to scroll top to bottom, right? You're going to kind of scroll up and down. Well, think of that in terms of your dashboard, right? You want your dashboard to scroll up and down as well. The other thing about that I learned early on in dashboard design is in the English speaking languages, we tend to focus left to right, top down, meaning I start over here in the left-hand side of my screen. So it might behoove you to put the most important metrics in the upper left or top. A lot of times people put them across the top of the thing. The other thing, like for this example, is we're using a hexagon diagram to block out each individual state instead of showing a state layout, right? It's just another criteria for being able to do it, right? Being able to use clear, simple, maybe using icons to represent the type of data that we have. that is something that we do. In this case, if I select, and this is not a live dashboard, but if I click, say, renewable, it will actually change the top visualization to show that type of information, right? Informed design. So this is an example where over here on the right, you see they're using green and red. However, on the left, they're using blue and like an amber color. Well, what you want to try to do is synchronize and standardize your color schemes so that they relate. So for example, now somebody can see, oh, when I'm negative, that's a red number. When I'm positive, it's a gray number. I don't know why they picked gray, but again, gray is something to think about. The other thing is, green and red, you don't necessarily want to mean bad and good. That may be detrimental to someone reading it. They might say, "Ooh, that's not good. That's inflammatory to me. I don't really like the way that that's viewed." So again, just be conscious of that. Maybe you use toned down colors of green and red. These are all really subtle things that make a difference in terms of the visualization. The other thing, this is I see this often, right? If you have more than 8 colors on your screen, it's basically garbage to your brain. I mean, what is the color scheme telling you? Can you pick out Georgia out of all those dots, right? You would literally have to go, you know, pixel by pixel here and figure it out, right? So the brain can only distinguish up to 8 colors, so don't use any more than 8 colors. This is actually helpful. This is called a cluster diagram. This is saying that the colors from, and this is actually quite a few different clusters. I may do only 3 or 4. The ones that are falling into, say, the green category are in this zone of the chart, right? So again, just it makes logical sense kind of once you see it, but for quantitative data, color intensity and divergent color palettes matter, right? That's what we talked about. Like we know that I should say I know in the data for the Superstore data that tables aren't selling very profitably. We sell a lot of them, you see, but you see it's a red bar. So it's saying that that's not so good. We maybe want to delve further into that as an issue. This is just, again, too, think about the way the choice of visualization. So time would be on an x-axis, right? The view over time over here, left to right on an x-axis. Location would be obviously on a map. We'll use GIS type spatial capabilities to visualize things on a map. Comparing values are good for bar charts, right? Comparing value, even multiple bars embedded in a bar chart. Exploring relationships, especially when you have 2 different measures, like you're trying to compare sales and profit at the level of product, right? It's good to show those on 2 different axes and then kind of throw a trend line in there to see where they fall, if they're above or below the trend line. And then relative proportions, a tree map would be something one might want to use. One can add interactivity. You can add filters over here on the right-hand side. You can add these hover over tooltips. Make it interactive so that, again, they can drill further down into the data. You can, link views where you click on one thing and it opens up another panel. It drills down to another panel. You can use what's called highlighting. In this case, the highlighting, if somebody clicks on public affairs, you'll see that it's going to highlight the data in here very, very boldly, right, as opposed to the other ones, which kind of fade to the background. So again, just there's capabilities in the product once you learn Tableau that enable you to do that. And then refining the dashboard, leveraging tooltips. So this is an example where, say, for example, the default way I configured the tooltip, the hover over tooltip, was just like this. Well, why not have it stand out a little more? I'm formatting it so it's showing the United Kingdom in big, bold, colored text, and it's highlighting in bold the actual number rather than just like this, right? That doesn't show very well. Let's see here. Leveraging tooltips. So I mentioned, by the way, that you see here, I'm hovering over Pennsylvania and I get this tooltip with charts already in it as well, broken down for Pennsylvania. So that's called Viz in Tooltip. I use it probably on every visualization I do. It extends the tooltip to enable you to essentially embed kind of filtered values of visualizations. Eliminating clutter. So again, don't put, they say any more than 4 visuals on the screen is too much. So in this case, could you take this dashboard and make it a little more effective? Well, let's see here. So, again, total complaints is up here in the upper left, because that's probably what we're concerned about, right? And then we look from a time perspective, we look from a geographic perspective. Sorry, I keep pressing the wrong button here. Complaints broken down by reason, by party. So that's probably enough information there. If they want to drill deeper, you may want to like drill into another visualization. And then just, use the exercises listed here. Is this simple enough for somebody to read? Give it to your colleague. Ask them to critique what you've created. I often say too with Tableau that, we're not all about creating dashboards. Any one of these individual visualizations is an insight into itself. The whole point of is we can share one of these visualizations. It doesn't have to be in a dashboard, or we can let our end user be an analyst too. That's something that I like to work with customers on. I get it. A lot of times people are designated by default to be the data person, right? They're the person that knows how to use the tool. But, in Tableau, we believe that a broader set of people can actually use Tableau. So here's some examples of like use cases before and after. So I don't like this one. First of all, this falls into that category where I put the title bubble plot over here, right? Is that very descriptive? A bubble plot of what, right? So these are dry, you might even want to say something like, fatality types broken down by whatever, right? As the title for this. Where are most of our fatalities happening? And in which state are most of our fatalities happening, right? Question mark. And you get the idea. So the revision of that dashboard comes to look like this, right? Where we kind of slap them with an engaging title, sobering effects of drunk driving. We've got accident metrics. We've got visualization showing the intensity. We've got very nice, and you see how late nights can be violent. These three, I like these because they're more in your face, right? Holidays can be tragic. Weekends are killer, right? Because they show a higher incidence of things there. Again, just choice and use of different types of visualizations critical. Here's a movie trend one that, again, they just kind of slapped a whole bunch of visuals together and you're not really sure how they relate. Well, in this case, maybe we start at the top and we say movie night, which is kind of a catchy title. Choose a genre. We're instructing them what to do. Choose a genre and or rating to find your next favorite movie. So then I maybe click concert or performance, and then it shows me all the ratings, and then it breaks them down below, right? It's a top to bottom sort of a flow. So again, and you might even have a little comment clip here when on this little icon in the upper right, you click on it and it pops up a nice little an explanation of where the data came from, who, blah, 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 all that kind of stuff, a whereby, all that kind of thing. Or here's kind of like when we do a typical demo of the Superstore stuff, we kind of create something that looks like this. And that, it's not great, but it's a first step at creating a dashboard. But you can see what are we looking at? We're looking at sales and profit geographically by city, and then broken down over here by region and by category and subcategory, and then here broken up in a scatter plot, right? And if this were a live dashboard, it would be interactive, right? If I clicked on this bubble for New York, you'd see it, funnel down to the East region. You'd see only the East region products, right? Well, why don't we do something like this? This is another example. I've got like 3 or 4 examples of taking this same data and showing it a little differently. We're breaking out the East region with a trend line here. We've got a push button that says, look at it at the state level, or click on this button and show it at the customer level. Here's another view where we visually are showing them, and they can click on the regions. They can have filters at the top that they use for pull downs. They have a set of bars at the top that allow them to select different views of the dashboard. You can see very clear metrics down below. There's this nice little, you've selected 10/1 through 12/30. There are 92 days in this period. Very descriptive, very informative. Here's one using what's called a Sankey chart. It's the same exact data, but it's just showing the relationship of how everything breaks down by product category, region, ship mode, and order priority, with some filters over here on the right. And then one last one, or one or two last ones here, Superstore sales analysis. And this one's very KPI oriented, where we have these kind of big numbers on the left with a spark line over here. Again, it's laid out with filters across the top, some nice icons. And then this one is a more executive sort of view, which is showing, tiles. If you wanted to put one thing in front of your executives, because they have to see key metrics that they necessarily want to see, this is what you may want to show. All right, so that's enough of that. I'm going to break it off here for the slides, and I'm going to come over to my workbook, my existing workbook. Now, again, just as a disclaimer, I've already created a bunch of visualizations, which I'm going to walk through before I actually create my dashboard. So there's kind of two phases to this. I've created some insights. So for example, I'm going to go over to this one called Sales by City. So I'm not going to go, I don't have time to go through. In fact, if you're interested as to how did I create this, tune into, we'll be having another session on desktop where we actually do this kind of building of content and insights and dashboards in a session. That will be repeating probably in about a month or so, or Kim can probably even give you the recording of that, because we record each of these as well. So in this case, what I want to point out is the fact that I chose a map, number one, and the map actually is showing a couple different things. It's showing things, the size of the bubble is the sales number, and the color of the bubble is represented by profitability. So again, New York City, it looks like we are selling a lot. And in this case, the profitability, well, let's see, I neglected to put profitability on this one. So this one is just showing sales, period. So you see how the representative size of these various is showing us that sales is represented a certain way. If I wanted to, for example, show the profit by each one, I could go ahead and instead replace the color. Let's say we're replacing the color by, let's just say average profit. And in this case, oops, not that one. It didn't do that one. Let me go backward. There we go. All right, so you notice the colors changed, right? And on our chart here, the less number that number you see there, the darker the brown, meaning the worse profit. So New York is actually doing good even with sales of this, but if we go down here to Houston, Texas, sales are minus 27. So again, now one thing I want to point out here too is the use of color. We've colored our kind of our text bars at the top, which again, you see here, I've said, how do sales compare by city? I didn't put a thing up here saying map, right? Map of sales. I said, how do sales compare by city? Because it prompts the user to understand a little bit about what we're showing in this visualization. All right. I'm just going to leave that one originally as it was. Let's point out a couple other visualizations. In this one, I chose to use what's called a dual axis, where we are using the sum of sales and the sum of the profit ratio in the same visualization, overlapping each other to show the relationships. So one can see, for example, that sales are way over here showing a large number of sales, yet the profit ratio, which is this number up top, is negative, right? So anywhere where I have a big divergence, like I've got a divergence here for furniture, I've got some here for supplies, whereas in this case, technology copiers, we're doing pretty well. We make good money on copiers. So we may want to step up the way that we're selling copiers, right? Or in this case, we sell a lot of furniture. We're not making a ton on it. So, in a very snapshot view, I can see which of my products and subcategories we sell well and also make a lot of money on, right? So I could focus maybe on, let's say, or needs improvement, right? Like this one, let's see, this one and this one are ones that we sell a good amount, but our profitability numbers aren't great. So let's focus on phones, chairs, and storage in our next quarter, right? It's that kind of thing. Colors. Stick with consistent colors. When I'm talking about the profit ratio, it's this orangey amber color. When I'm talking about sales, it's this blue color. And you'll see kind of a ripple effect through all of my visualizations where I want to make sure that I keep those colors uniform so that when they go chart to chart, they're going to have a uniformed view. Let's look at another one. So this is a scatter plot. This is showing me that I've got a profit ratio on the y-axis, so the more profitable this way, the discounting over here on the right, right? Now, the sales is represented by the size of the bubble, right? So over here, chairs, we discount them a good amount, and we're selling a good amount over here, right? So, but we want to be careful of, are these over here, because we're discounting heavily, but we're also making, not as much profit, right? In fact, with tables, we're making negative profit. So actually, I would say let's focus in on tables, because we're discounting way too much. Maybe that's part of the problem, right? As opposed to, labels up here, we don't sell a lot, but we don't discount them either, but we sell a lot of them. Copiers, as we mentioned before, we discount them a little, but we sell a good amount of them, right? So this gives me a ton of information just in looking at this. What is the trade-off between the discount and the profit, right? It prompts somebody to view what they're looking at. You see that the product lines, blue for furniture, white for office supplies, or kind of off-white, and technology is in the brown color. That is, again, something that we standardize across the visualizations. And then lastly, we have the time series one, where we're comparing period over period with profit and quantity. So I'm sorry, with sales and quantity in this case, not profit. So quantity is represented in blue, in green, and sales are represented in blue. Like we said before, we wanted to have blue be representing sales, green representing quantity. So we can just see visually is the trend, and these pretty much align. So these two are in sync, right? We're selling kind of an increase over time. While it looks cyclical, we do sell things in a cyclical manner, which is, again, information that's important, but we are uptrending, which is good. We seem to also be selling more a slope higher in terms of quantity, as opposed to the value of sales. So that may not be good, only because we're selling more, but we're making, we're whatever. We probably want to add profitability to this to see something that looks interesting. Okay, now a couple other things I want to point out, since to construct the dashboard, I wanted to make sure that we had these metric numbers. So you see, like this is going to become what I call a big analytic number, or a BAN. You can kind of construe other definitions for that. These are basically things I might want to put at the top of my dashboard. I also may want to have associated with that a spark line that looks like this. And you'll see that this is big, but it's going to be a very small chart when I add it into the dashboard. Similarly, I have one for total quantity. This is just a viz that has a text value in it that I formatted to be, a very bold font and have a little label header to it. And then as well, the quantity line looks like this. The profit line looks like that. And that's pretty much it. Those are the things that we want to combine into our dashboard to make it look. So now I'm going to use the second half of this is how do I design my dashboard? So in Tableau, we use this palette here, this dashboard palette, which looks slightly different than a worksheet view. And you'll notice as I hover over the left, I'm seeing all of my views, and I'm going to essentially drag them and construct my dashboard here in this middle area. I need to do some work though. First, I need to set up what the definition of my Browser window is going to be, it's going to be a custom view at, we're going to go 1200 by 1100 pixels. That'll make it a little wider. You want to think about where this visualization is going to end up. Is it going to be embedded in a dashboard? If it is, then you have to make sure your pixels are going to fit right. So that's one thing to consider there as well. All right, now how does this drop zone area work? Well, I could just start dragging and dropping these things in. Like I can drag this here and I can drag this here, and that's well and good. But the problem is when I get a lot of things on my screen, it gets very difficult to manage the use of space. So I'm going to kind of undo what I did here. And I'm going to start by talking about these containers. There's horizontal containers and vertical containers. They're used because they can condense and manage a group of objects or visualizations together. So I'm going to just drag in a horizontal container here. Now, it doesn't look like much. You see, it's kind of now given me a drop zone area. So now that I have that horizontal container, I'm going to take my map. Now, again, just aside here, I've been using Tableau for 6 years. So I obviously, know these sorts of facets and skills, right? Through some brief training, one can learn these capabilities. It's not that hard. We can work with you in terms of a learning plan on how you can get up to speed with this. So again, we're going to take our sales by city and we're going to drop it in the middle of that container. Now, I'll come back to this in a second. Now, you notice that it also pulled in and gave me this little legend area over here on the right side of the screen. That's fine. I'm going to leave that for now. I don't necessarily want to have that. It's going to take up too much real estate in my visualization, but let's leave it there for now. The other thing you're going to want to be conscious of, and this is tedious, I will give you that with Tableau, is understanding where you are and in what container you're working with. So, for example, if I were to double click here, I see that, oh yes, the master container for this is my horizontal container, but the visualization that's in it is sales by city. You can see that here. That's just one of those, you got to get used to how this dashboard panel is laid out and how it works. So the next thing I'm going to do is I want this to be over on the right-hand side in this horizontal container. Remember, the horizontal container now contains both of these two visualizations. Why did I put it in a container? Well, now it allows me to use some of these features like distribute contents evenly, which means if I have maybe 2 or 3, it'll actually put them equidistant from each other in this box that I have. And I'm actually now going to add another horizontal container below this at the very bottom of the dashboard. Actually, let me scroll up a little bit so we can see that. I'll just leave it there. Now you notice it's scrunched up the rest of things in my dashboard. That's good. That's fine. I'm going to take this visualization and drag it and drop it into that horizontal pane. And I always want to make sure that it actually did add it there. So I'm going to double check. Let's see. Yeah, it added it into the horizontal container. It's kind of a hierarchy of elements. And if you wanted to see what the horizontal, or on the bottom left here, you can see what the hierarchy is. Yep, there's my horizontal container. Here's my other vertical. Somehow I added a vertical container in there. This does get very tedious with Tableau. I will grant you that. This is an area that we're looking at improving over time with future versions, is making it a little easier to manage the drag and drop zones. All right, the last viz I'm going to add in here for this one will be the sales and quantity over time, and I'm just simply going to put it in that area. I'm once again going to come in here and I'm going to say distribute contents evenly. Now, I'm going to deal with this in a little bit. I'm not going to mess with my legends area just yet because there's a method to my madness. The next thing I want to add is another horizontal container right above at the very top where I want to put those metric values. So my metrics were sales, so I'm going to drag that one in here. You see there's a header. We'll deal with that in a minute. There's the quantity metric. I'm going to add that over here to the right. You see it kind of spaces it equidistantly within that container. And then I have a profit ratio metric, and I will add that one over here. So now I've got these three. I'm going to just simply right click on the title, hide the title, because it's kind of obvious what these are. I don't need the title for that one. Now that I have that, I can start sizing this up a little bit so that they fit in my window. Now, why did I leave space here? Well, that's a design little trick I have. So what I'm now going to do is I'm going to flip into floating mode. So there's two different modes. I can either be tiled, where it'll actually fix it to an area of the screen, or I can use floating, which lets it float anywhere I want and place it on the screen. Both have benefits and drawbacks. The drawback of floating is that if you resize your visualizations, floating will be sitting somewhere fixed on the screen where maybe you don't want it to be. Okay, and I'll show you. I'll demonstrate that in just a second. So the last thing I'm going to do here is add an area for a text window for a title bar for my visualization. So let's add another horizontal container again at the very top. And you see what happened here? Like these guys got scrunched up. That's okay. I'm just going to resize things to make them appear again. There we go. There's my text box. Now in this top window, I'm going to drag in a text object. Oops, sorry. Yep, I want to add in. Oh, well, let me make sure that's a horizontal. Okay, it's a horizontal container. I think I need to make it a little bigger for some reason. I don't know. It's just a little touchy. There we go. And I'm going to call it Sales Analysis Dashboard. A very, very descriptive title. You can be, as descriptive as you want to be. I'm going to make it bold font. I'm going to make it size 24. And actually, that's fine. And I'm actually going to make it white in font. Now, the reason I'm making it that is I'm going to go to the properties for this. Remember, we have a color scheme going here, and I'm going to set the background of that text to be this color. So now a white font will show up. Now, again, this is one of those design decisions. If you like kind of a reversed, all dark background with white headers, go for it, or I would encourage you to follow your agency's trends for design. I know each agency has its own color schemes, color palettes, and all of that, right? So you want to follow that. Okay, now it's kind of tidying things up. So I'm going to just extend this down a little bit. You see that we're filling the space. Maybe I need to make this a little wider here. Maybe I need to make, actually, now that I think about it, I need my spark lines. I missed those. So let's come in here, find our sales line. I'm going to add it. Oops, sorry. I'm going to add it as a floating. And I'm going to put it right here next to sales. I'm going to scrunch it up and toggle off the header. And now we have a nice little spark line right next to our sales number, right? Kind of cool. It just kind of appears there now. Now, let's do the same thing for quantity. I have a quantity line. So let's put that in here. Let's size it. Toggle off the, okay. And then we have a profit ratio line. Once again, we size it. And I'll mention too, this is Craig Bartel's vision of how a dashboard could look. I'm not saying this is the right end-all be-all way to do it. It's just the way I like to design dashboards. I like to have kind of bold, color-based titles for each one of the visualizations. The other thing you want to consider is in visualizations, removing any grid lines, because grid lines can be very annoying. They just take up a lot of space. So you'll notice well, let me finish what I'm doing here. So these legends, I'm going to now make floating, and I'm going to put like this one over here that is showing as it relates to sales. This is the date window value, and I'm actually going to make it floating and drag it up to the title bar because I want to have the ability for the user to select an order date range. And you notice I pre-made the actual text white so it would show up against this background. I don't need this little size, so I'm going to just remove that altogether. I don't need these measure names. You might want to put them in there, you might not. And then this last one I'm going to just make floating, and I'm going to put this down by my one that it attaches to, which is the trade-off between discount percent and profit. Now, the last thing, let me get rid of that little legend window, and you'll notice everything. Now, you see how my sales box is still fixed right there? I need to come back and move it. So that's why I do that. You know, you got to be careful with floating. Now the sales is behind, you know, Miami, so maybe I want to change this box a little in terms of its size. Move it around so that it shows up down here. Yeah. So again, that's kind of, you know, how I would go about doing this. Now, some last tidy up things, I may want to come in here and then make this a filter, which means that if I select, say, you know, this band of values, you'll see that all of the other visualizations follow suit. I could do the same thing with each one of these. I'm just going to make them be filters. And then voila, that's kind of what my dashboard looks like, right? I can use the date slider here to funnel down in the dates. I can use, I want to focus in on tables. So I just click this into tables. Oops. And now I look at the table profitability and where we're selling. Maybe I want to look at time, or maybe, you know, I want to look at these cluster of, you know, because they're similar in terms of discount and profit. So it allows me to kind of look and slice and dice different ways throughout my data. So that is the material that I have for today. We've finished a little bit early. I'm going to go back to the question in the chat here. So let me give me a second to read this. Yeah, all right. So somebody is saying that it's tedious to incorporate headers and footers. Reusable components for these would be nice. Well, you can reuse a visualization. What I suggest too is, yeah, like you're creating a dummy dashboard. That's exactly what I do. I create a template dashboard that has, say, headers and footers and logos and those sorts of things, and I allow certain space in the screen for that. Let's see here. The recommended font type size. Yeah, that is very dependent on how much content you have. Where's the end place? Where is this dashboard going to be put, right? Is it going to be put into a dashboard with tons of other things embedded around it? Or is it going to take up the whole screen? So there's so many aspects of things to think about. But the font, like, for example, at Salesforce, we have a Salesforce font. There's an actual font called Salesforce. So any dashboards that are internally facing, we have to use a Salesforce font on the dashboard. Otherwise, it doesn't conform to our standards. We also have color schemes and things that have to be in logos, where there's certain logos we can use and can't use, and all of that, especially if this is public facing stuff. So it is important that while Tableau is a tool that any person can essentially start working with, once you start deploying content to others, you probably want to make sure you're following some standards.
Yeah, I have a question about the dashboard. I have a dashboard with multiple data sources, but I only need to refresh a few of data source weekly. But the thing is, we have to do this in the local only. We have to do it in the desktop. So every week we download the dashboard from the Tableau server, then we refreshed a few data source, then we republish to the Tableau server. That's kind of tedious. So I would like to know whether there is way we can only refresh the a few data source than in the server way. But we tried, we didn't find that way.
Yeah, well, let me talk a little bit about that. So you can, what it would require, there's different ways of constructing a workbook. Like in this case, the connection is embedded in the workbook itself, right?
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
can make it an extract, but I can also save the data as a separate data source, right? Like, and when we
Mm-hmm.
say data source, Tableau data source, not, let's say it's Excel. Your original source is Excel. I make a data source out of it. Now I can publish that data source to server, and then I could point this workbook to use that data source, and then I could set that data source on an extract refresh schedule so that the dashboard will pick up the current version. That is really called using an external data source rather than a packaged data source. Does that make sense?
So you mean, yeah, we have all the data source on the server. But for example, there are 12 data source, but I only need to refresh three or two of them.
Mm-hmm.
So usually on the server, we have the schedule refresh. That means we have to refresh all the data source. But now the thing is I have to only refresh two of them. So that's kind of manual work. And also we have to do it on the desktop because on the server, I only find a way we have to refresh all the data source instead of two of them. That's what I found. I hope to know, yeah, whether there is a way I can only refresh two of them.
Well, yeah, I'm not sure I follow. Why are the other two not refreshable from server? Like, why do you have to manually do them?
Because usually we do the automatic refresh. We have to refresh all the data source, right?
Well, no, I mean you can if let's say that this workbook had this one has just
Mm-hmm.
one, but let's say that I had four data sources in this workbook. They're all
Mm-hmm.
separate. You know, let's pretend that I made them separate data sources, but they're all four separate data sources brought into this one workbook, and they refresh on whatever schedule each one of those four individual ones is on, right? The workbook is just pulling them from wherever they are. So
Mm-hmm.
if they're, if you said there's four, I would say, well, make all four of them be published data sources that refresh on their own schedules, right? Their own individuals. The data source can have its own refresh schedule. It's not, doesn't have to be on the workbook refresh schedule. You know what I mean? Um, like just trying to see if I could find an example. I
Yeah.
may, if we may need to take this offline. I mean, I'm happy to, do a quick, a separate session, but that's, there shouldn't be a reason why you're limited to only having to every time do it from the desktop. You could certainly set up schedules for every one of those data sources to refresh on their own schedule. And then the workbook is just going to pick up whatever the current data is for that data source. Unless
Mm.
I'm missing something I here.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Sounds good.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was going to say too, just, since we're getting a little bit up to time here,
Mm-hmm.
for future questions, probably Kim is the first point of contact, but Kim and I are, she knows where to find me. So if we need to schedule a follow-up session on any of this stuff, we can certainly do it. We just like to make sure there's a focal point within DIT so that, we can share the knowledge of anything about, there might be something specific to DIT and, rules and regulations about how you can and can't connect to data sources and all that, schedules and, all that, right? So I encourage you to go use Kim as a first point of contact, but I'm absolutely there to help you guys answer questions like this. And sometimes, like in your specific question, Allie, we just maybe get on a WebEx, right, and take a look, because it's hard for me to visualize exactly what you're talking about. But anyway, really good question.
I have a quick question.
Sure.
So is it recommended practice to actually use vertical and horizontal containers as opposed to just dragging your viz to the dashboard, like tiling it?
Yeah. When you have very specific positioning, like you may have blank space around an icon, or it has to fit very specifically into a particular area around other things. That's when you have to start combining like vertical and horizontal um, things. Now, if you keep your dashboards very simple, probably not, but the challenge comes in these highly intricate, very, very pixel perfect sort of dashboards. You're almost forced to use them. And it also gives you those tools like I showed, like distributing the contents evenly, where, you can then have it segment them equally within. Like, let's say you had a vertical container within a horizontal container. Well, then that'll help you space both of them out as things change, right? Otherwise, it's very difficult to say add another container within another container. It wants to, like, I'm sure you've experienced this, it wants to put it in the whole area, not in just the area you want it, right?
Yeah, I just find it a bit messy when using horizontal vertical containers. And I don't know, for some reason, I've noticed like it creates containers that you weren't expecting.
I totally get you. It is tedious. It's not perfect, and it is something that they are looking at redesigning. That's been in the works for a while. They're kind of going through a revamp of the Tableau interface, for the future. So I think that's part of the whole construct is, the ease and use of. They're trying to make it a little bit more PowerPoint-ish, for better for worse, I guess. That's sort of a model. So that's what I heard anyway. So don't quote me on that. Yeah. So no, real good questions here. So any last questions? We got a couple minutes left.
Just this is more of an aside question.
Sure.
It's to do with the functionality of Tableau in general, because you've got these predefined functions that you can use in Tableau. But are there any in future releases a tight integration with Python, especially with regards to machine learning and things like that, and integration with the output with Tableau?
So yeah, that's a whole topic unto itself. So natively today within Tableau, there is the capability that there's something called TabPy, which is the ability to interject Python scripts. Like, for example, if I were to create a calculated, let's say that you wanted to punch out to an algorithm you wrote in Python or something in Python that did risk scoring, and you wanted to send it back and visualize it. You can use these script functions like this for passing to a Python function here, right here. You see this?
But I've noticed like it's very convoluted the way if you use those functions, because you have to like surround in quotes and all that, and then pass it to Python using that tabpy package.
Yeah. Trying to think. I mean, that's kind of where we're at now. A lot of our more AI capabilities are more built into being assistive capabilities, not like code related.
Right. Yeah.
There is, I will say, okay, this is kind of going out there a little bit, but I don't know if you've heard there's something called Tableau AI, which is built on Einstein AI, which is the foundational models that we're building to use for things like Tableau Pulse, which is a whole nother thing that I don't have time to demonstrate right now, but it's basically KPI driven metrics, right? Now, behind the scenes, those are using everything from generative, predictive, pattern matching algorithms, but they're kind of closed boxed right now. But they do use things like OpenAI, but they're going to move to bring your own model. And that's probably as close as I could think to where, for example, you could develop your own model in whatever you want to develop it in, and then embed it, and then use it in the model generation aspect of whatever tool it is that you're using here. But for practical purposes, what I showed here, that's really the most rubber meets the road way of using Python today.
Right. Okay.
You can use it in Tableau Prep too, by the way. I don't know if you're familiar with Tableau Prep.
Yes, I've used Tableau Data Prep quite extensively as well.
Yeah. So there's the ability to include Python in there.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm trying to think if there's any other
Yeah, because I've also used the hyper package in Python as well for reading hyper files, and you could use the Python Panda library to do the analysis.
Yeah, 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 and you touch on an interesting point, which is at its core, Tableau is really designed to be like for ease of use for the end user, right?
Yeah.
So as people like start getting into this data science, and again, I'm not at all saying, oh, you're using Tableau for the wrong purpose. But again, thinking of it from the perspective, well, we've designed Tableau to be for that type of a user, right? So it doesn't have like data, like that data science sort of deep sort of capability, right? Now you can tap into it, and that might change in the future too as we move more into the whole AI world. But I don't know. Now I'm kind of getting off track. Well, I think we are at time. So if there's any further questions, please get a hold of Kim. I appreciate your time today. So have a great day, and we'll talk to you soon.